Crooked House is a standalone Agatha Christie novel published in 1949. Its one and only film adaptation was released in 2017, featuring Glenn Close and Terence Stamp. Our protagonist for this story is Charles Hayward, who served in the diplomatic service during World War II. He's gallant, intrepid, has a rigid moral code, and is a little bit dim. So, basically Captain Hastings. During the war, he meets and falls in love with Sophia Leonidas. Charles resolves to marry her after the war is over, but 2 years later there's a problem. Her grandfather, Aristide Leonidas, has just been murdered, and his whole family is under suspicion. Once again, we have a precursor to Knives Out. Look, it even has the same 2 dogs! The family members include Brenda, Aristide's second wife, several decades his junior, who may or may not be having an affair with the live-in tutor, Lawrence Brown; Aristide's son, Roger; Roger's wife, Clemency; Aristide's younger son, Philip; Philip's wife, Magda; their children, Sophia, Eustace, and Josephine; and Aristide's sister-in-law by his first marriage, Edith de Havilland. There's also a nanny. Charles asks his father, the Assistant Commissioner of Scotland Yard, for permission to be part of the investigation, and he joins Chief Inspector Taverner to interview the suspects. Taverner has reason to suspect Brenda, who seems to have the strongest motive and was the one who actually administered the poison. Someone had switched Aristide's regular insulin injection for Esserine. But she would have had plenty of opportunity to dispose of the evidence and avert suspicion, so that doesn't make sense. Everyone knew they were mentioned in Aristide's will, but they were just as well off with Aristide alive, so no strong motives there. Strangely, the will that Aristide signed in front of everyone is found unsigned, so it's unclear who actually benefits. 12-year-old Josephine likes to play detective, and lets slip that Roger and Clemency were planning to flee the country because the family business was about to crash. However, that turns out to be a dead end. Charles becomes concerned for Josephine. What if, with all her snooping, she becomes a danger to the true culprit? The film starts us off with a darker tone right away as Brenda gives Aristide the fatal injection. The time period has been moved to the 1950s, so we have a lot of Cold War themes. Charles is now a private detective, with a secretary named Miss Ackroyd, and his relationship with Sophia is over.
You want to know why I left?
No,
I didn't want you to become involved with my family.
In the book, it was established right away that Aristide was murdered, but in the film, Sophia says she's afraid it was murder. At first, Charles refuses to investigate, but apparently he needs the money and the publicity. Instead of Charles tagging along with the police, Taverner says Charles can go in first, citing political reasons that, frankly, I had a hard time following. Charles interviews each suspect, then, even though they're not an item anymore, Charles and Sophia go out dancing and kissing, and we start seeing flashbacks of their time in Cairo. There's a subplot about somebody following Charles, but it turns out to be one of Taverner's men, leading to Taverner telling Charles to solve the case, which he was already trying to do. We're halfway through both book and film, and we're at the point where I'm really trying to like the movie, but the biggest problem is I don't care. Film Charles might be more intelligent, but he's also more angsty, which makes book Charles more likable. Christie made the stakes plain right from the start. If the mystery isn't solved, Charles can't marry Sophia and live happily ever after. But in the film, what are the stakes? Are there stakes? I thought at first that whoever wrote the screenplay understood the story they were adapting because they kept Sophia's line about her family members having different kinds of ruthlessness, but the way they treated the characters indicates otherwise. For example, Magda in the book is vibrant and entertaining, switching from persona to persona depending on whom she's talking to. Her husband Philip is wooden, seemingly emotionless, providing a fascinating contrast to his wife. In the film, Magda is mildly provocative, and Philip is just rude, but they do nothing to establish themselves as memorable characters. It's possible they were altered with the intent of making them more interesting, but if so, it had the opposite effect. The only character who's remotely intriguing is Edith, but that might have more to do with who's playing her. On the plus side, they didn't do too badly with Charles's relationship with Josephine. Taverner in the book functions more or less as a mentor to Charles, so I like that they took this line of Taverner's and put it here.
Did you find many clues?
The first round of interrogation is not so much about finding clues as it is about getting a sense of who you're dealing with.
What's frustrating is how many great lines they left out, like this exchange between Charles and Taverner. Just who am I supposed to be? What do you mean? I'm not a policeman or anything, so what do I say if someone asks me what I'm doing here? Has anyone asked you? No, but then shut up. We're also missing a great scene where Charles asks his father what murderers are like. His father tells him that if there's one common denominator, it's vanity, a big clue which practically gives away the solution, but no one ever sees it. You'll have noticed that Charles's father isn't in the film, though he was still the AC of Scotland Yard.
I knew a Hayward once. Assistant Commissioner of Scotland Yard, something of a legend in the force.
My father?
Until he was murdered. And they never found out who did it.
No.
Sounds interesting, doesn't it? Guess where it's going to lead? That's right, nowhere.
Because, as I just told the family, we realized only this morning that this will has no signature.
When he says he just told the family, he's referring to a pivotal scene in the book which it seems the filmmakers decided should take place off-screen. Why would you do that? It's the first time we get to see the whole family in one place and interact with each other. It's an amazing scene. Why would you skip it? One more thing before we move on. Edith tells Charles that the reason the whole family is so crooked, so to speak, even though we haven't really been shown that, only told, is that
this is what happens when the person you love the most in the world is actually the same person that you hate the most. I'm certain you understand, Mr. Hayward. You wouldn't be in this house yourself otherwise.
changing Charles from, in every sense, an outsider to someone crooked like this family could be a strong change, depending on what it leads to. So, going back to the book, Josephine is hurt that Charles passed on her tip about Roger to the police, while in the film, Charles apparently guessed about Roger's difficulties via divine inspiration. Charles offers her a sincere apology, and Josephine decides to let him be her Dr. Watson again, which is a great line, but Charles is still concerned that playing Sherlock Holmes could put the girl in great danger. Charles's father advises him to let them talk to you. So Charles listens and tries to understand the complicated family dynamics, a mixture of poor communication and excessive adoration, or conflicting affections, as one character puts it. The growing implication is that whatever the real motive was, it was something unusual, complex, a deep psychological reason. On the other hand, the nanny proclaims that it was either communists or Catholics. This is the only reference to communism in the book.
Communism was just a red herring.
Josephine eagerly announces that it's about time for the second murder. Not too long after, someone deliberately concusses her via a booby trap, but she survives. Josephine's room is found torn apart. Was someone searching for something? Charles discovers what he thinks is Josephine's hiding place and finds love letters from Brenda to Lawrence. The two of them are arrested, and it seems the nightmare is over, except the family never really suspected them. They've sensed all along that the murderer is one of them. Finally, the mystery of the will is solved. Aristide had a second will, which he kept secret by pretending to sign the first. By this will, Sophia inherits everything. Her parents and brother are pissed. Her aunt and uncle are ecstatic. And Charles, once he finds out Sophia knew ahead of time that she would be Aristide's heir, is suddenly uneasy. The nightmare returns with another murder, that of Nanny. Charles remembers Josephine mentioning she saw Lawrence hiding the love letters, which means the killer wasn't searching her room for the letters, they were searching for her notebook. That, combined with the fact that Nanny was poisoned by a cup of cocoa intended for Josephine, indicates the girl is still in danger. Josephine tells Charles she knows who did it, but he fails to get her to tell him. Edith takes Josephine in her car to get ice cream. Charles allows it because Edith is the one person he doesn't suspect. Therefore, it's a shock when he's told Edith ran her car into a quarry, killing both her and Josephine. Edith left behind a letter confessing to the murder of Aristide, exonerating Brenda and Lawrence, but she also left behind Josephine's notebook. Just before reading it, Charles has an epiphany. The murderer was Josephine. She killed Aristide simply because he wouldn't let her have ballet lessons. She faked the attack on herself and killed Nanny just to bring back the police and the excitement. Edith, who had a terminal illness, wanted to spare Josephine the suffering she would have endured once she was found out. Charles suspects Aristide kept Josephine from school and ballet in order to protect other children from her. Now that it's really all over, Charles and Sophia finally get their happy ending. As for the film, the memoir's plot thread leads nowhere. The Cairo flashbacks lead nowhere. Edith's hints about Charles lead nowhere. Roger has another layer added to his character. Not only does he hate and suspect Brenda, he also fancies her. And that leads nowhere. The "You're Watson" line is there, but it feels out of place, like they forgot and then tried to shoehorn it in. The question, "What are murderers like?" turns up late, asked by Edith, and Charles is the one who answers. He does mention vanity, but...
Well, that description fits every member of this family.
Well, then you wasted a valuable clue. We lose a second clue when they change Josephine's booby trap. In the book, they find mud on a chair, implying someone stood on it. The only person who'd need to be taller to set the booby trap is, of course, a 12-year-old. In the film, Josephine's room is not searched, or rather, faked to look like it's been searched, but we see Edith steal the girl's notebook. Lawrence did not hide the letters because it turns out Josephine forged the letters herself. The second poison is changed from digitalin to cyanide, but in both cases it implicates Edith. Instead of Charles and Sophia learning of the last two deaths after the fact, we get a chase scene, during which they read out sections of Josephine's notebook. They're too late to stop the car from going into the quarry. They're devastated. We zoom in on Aristide's portrait, implying it was completely his fault, which was not at all the point. And finally, Charles and Sophia get their happy end. Never mind, the movie's over. The film did improve a little once we got to the revelation that Sophia is her grandfather's heir, but by then it's just too late. The characters in the book were quirky, interesting. These people are just mean, and mean can be interesting too, but not in this case. Some of these characters blame their unhappiness on Aristide, saying he controlled them, which, yes, in the book he did, but not in the way they mean here. It's been changed to something less compelling, banal. In a nutshell, the movie tried and failed to do what Knives Out did successfully, have a cast of characters both revolting and entertaining. Even though I wasn't too happy with the result, I'm at least glad someone tried to make a Christie movie featuring one of her lesser-known protagonists. Their appearances in the world of film and TV are scant, but they're still worth talking about, as we'll do next time. Thanks for joining me.